Behind glass at Graceland sits the pink Cadillac the whole world recognizes, gleaming, restored, photographed 1,000,000 times over. Almost nobody realizes it was the replacement. Elvis Presley owned an earlier one, and by his own account, he loved that first machine far more. He called it the most beautiful thing he'd ever laid eyes on. A poor, unknown kid, barely 20, so besotted that he parked outside his hotel and stayed awake the entire night, just watching it in the dark. By the next afternoon, it was burning at the edge of an Arkansas road. Most men would have been broken. What the king did instead turned his worst day into the birth of a legend, and a single strange choice decided which of the two cars history would remember. Ever lost something the very moment it became yours? Stay with me. If you enjoy forgotten British car stories like this, consider subscribing. There are many more coming every week. To understand why a car could break a young man's heart, you have to go back to who Elvis Presley was in the early months of 1955, because he was nobody yet. He was 19, then 20, a truck driver's son from a poor family in Mississippi, raised in public housing, who sang in a way nobody in the record business quite knew what to do with. He'd cut a few raw singles for a small Memphis record label. He was playing schoolhouses and fairgrounds and radio barn dances across the South, driving himself and his two bandmates, Scotty Moore on guitar, Bill Black slapping the bass, from one small town to the next, chasing a crowd that was only just beginning to scream. They had almost nothing. Their first touring car, a Lincoln, had already been wrecked that spring. Money was thin, sleep was thinner, and real success was still only a rumor rather than a fact. Now, in that world, in the American South in 1955, understand what a Cadillac meant. It wasn't simply a car. It was the car, the shining proof that a man had climbed out of wherever he'd started and arrived somewhere better. For a poor Southern boy who had grown up with nothing, a Cadillac wasn't transport. It was a trophy that said the struggle had been worth it. It was the American dream itself, wrapped in chrome and riding on white-wall tires. And Elvis wanted one so badly he could taste it. You have to remember where he was coming from to feel the weight of that hunger. He'd been born in a 2-room shotgun house his father built by hand, in one of the poorest corners of Mississippi. As a boy, he'd worn hand-me-downs and known what it was to go without. His family had moved to Memphis chasing work and ended up in public housing, scraping by week to week. Nobody in that world owned a Cadillac. You saw them glide past, the doctors, the bankers, the men who'd arrived, and you understood, without anyone saying it, that those cars belonged to a different kind of person than you. So for Elvis, wanting one wasn't vanity. It was a way of telling himself that the door he'd been locked out of his whole life might finally, actually open. So when a little money finally came in, he found one. A second-hand 1954 Cadillac Fleetwood, already painted a soft pink and white, long and low and gorgeous, with a huge V8 up front. It wasn't new. It didn't need to be. To a kid who'd had nothing his whole life, it was the finest object he had ever stood next to. And what he did, the night he brought it home, tells you everything about how much it meant. It's the part of this story that stops being about a car at all. Elvis parked that Cadillac outside his hotel, and then he could not bring himself to go to sleep. He stayed up, all night, just sitting with it, looking at it in the dark, watching the streetlight catch the chrome. Years later, he described that night himself, and his own words are better than anything I could write for him. "The first car I bought was the most beautiful car I've ever seen," he said. "It was second-hand, but I parked it outside my hotel the day I got it, and stayed up all night just looking at it." Sit with that image for a moment, because it is pure. This is not a rich, jaded superstar with a garage full of toys. This is a broke 20-year-old who has finally got the one thing he dreamed about, and he's so overwhelmed by it, so afraid it might not be real, that he keeps watch over it through the night, like a boy guarding treasure. He didn't want to close his eyes and risk waking to find it gone. That's the detail that makes what happens next almost unbearable. Because the very next day, the band had a show to play down in Hope, Arkansas. and then a long drive on to their next stop in Texas. So after the performance, Elvis climbed into his beautiful pink Cadillac and pointed it down the highway toward Texarkana, the engine humming, the whole shining future spread out ahead of him on the open road. He had owned his ultimate prize for barely a day. He would not own it for 2. About halfway along that road, near a small place called Fulton, Arkansas, something went wrong deep inside the car. A brake lining, a small, unglamorous part, the kind of thing nobody ever thinks about, overheated and caught fire. And once a fire takes hold under a moving car, it moves fast. Smoke first, then flame, licking up from beneath the pink body he'd just kept vigil over. Elvis got it stopped. He got out. And then there was nothing to do but stand at the edge of the road and watch. The people who were there remembered the sight of him. This young man who'd had the world in his hands 24 hours earlier, sitting by the roadside, looking utterly desolate, watching his dream burn down to a blackened shell in front of him. The chrome he'd admired under the streetlight, the pink paint, all of it curling and melting into smoke, rising over an empty Arkansas highway. There is a photograph, taken just 10 days before, of Elvis and Bill Black sitting proudly on the hood of that very car at a parade in Mississippi, grinning, on top of the world. 10 days. That's how long the happiness lasted between the photo and the fire. Back home in Memphis, the story in the family went that his mother, Gladys, woke suddenly from a deep sleep that same night with the strange, cold feeling that something, somewhere, had gone terribly wrong. Whether you believe a mother can feel such things or not, it fits, because Gladys and that pink Cadillac would soon be bound together in a way nobody could have guessed while it sat there burning. Most people, losing their dream car the day after they got it, would have taken it as a sign. A cruel joke, a door closing. Elvis did the opposite, and the choice he made turned a disaster into the most famous automobile in the history of music. A month later, barely a month, Elvis walked back into a Cadillac dealership. He'd had a run of luck in between. His record, Baby Let's Play House, had just become the first song he ever put on a national chart, climbing into the country top 5. Money was starting, at last, to move in his direction. So he did the only thing a man that's stubborn about a dream ever does after watching it burn. He bought another one. But here is where the story turns, and where it stops being about heartbreak and starts being about the birth of a legend, because the second car was not like the first. The first pink Cadillac had been an accident of love. He'd bought it already pink, fallen for it as it was. The second one, he was going to build into exactly what he wanted, and oddly enough, it didn't start out pink at all. The replacement was a brand new 1955 Cadillac Fleetwood Series 60, and when he bought it, it was blue, with a black roof. A beautiful car in its own right, loaded with everything Cadillac could offer that year. A huge V8, power windows, power brakes, air conditioning, even a clever electric eye up front that dipped the headlights for oncoming traffic on its own. Cutting-edge machinery for 1955, but blue. Elvis didn't want blue, he wanted pink, and not just any pink. Why pink at all? Here's the piece that ties it all together, the kind of detail that turns a car story into something richer. Remember that song, Baby Let's Play House, the one that had just made him a chart act? In it, Elvis sang about a pink Cadillac. He'd put the image into the world in a lyric before he ever made a real one his own. So now, with fame arriving and a new Cadillac in his hands, he set out to turn the line he'd sung into a thing you could touch. He took the blue car to a neighbor on Lamar Street, a man named Art, and asked him to mix a custom color, a pink that existed nowhere else. Art did exactly that, blending a shade unique to Elvis and giving it a name that would outlive them both, Elvis Rose. But the most touching thing Elvis did with that car wasn't the paint. It was who he gave it to. He gave it to his mother, Gladys Presley, the woman who'd raised him with almost nothing, who'd gone without so her boy could have a little more, was handed the keys to the grandest car her son could buy, a gleaming pink Cadillac, custom painted, the very symbol of everything the family had never been able to afford. And here is the reality that breaks your heart a little. In the best way, Gladys couldn't drive. She never held a driver's license in her life. She would never once take that Cadillac out on the road herself. Which means the gift was never really about driving at all. Think about what it actually was. A boy who'd grown up poor, who'd watched his mother do without, was now standing in front of her saying, "Look what I can give you now." The car was a love letter with a V8 engine. It didn't need to move an inch to do its job. Gladys would proudly point to it and call it hers, her Cadillac, and that was the entire point. It was proof, sitting in the drive, that her son had made it, and that the first thing he wanted to do with success was lay it at her feet. For a while, everything was golden, but that second pink Cadillac was about to have a brush with the very same fate that destroyed the first, and in almost the very same place. Because just weeks after Elvis got it, the car was out on the road with his guitarist Scotty at the wheel when it collided with a pickup truck that was pulling out to pass. The crash did $1,000 of damage, a serious sum then, and the town where it happened? Texarkana. The exact stretch of country, near the same border, where the first pink Cadillac had burned to nothing just months before. For a heartbeat, history looked ready to repeat itself. The same car, the same road, the same threat of a fiery, twisted end. But this time, something was different. This time, Elvis had a safety net the poor kid of a year earlier never had. By now, Elvis had signed with RCA. The money was real, and it was growing fast. So where the first Cadillac had been left to burn because there was nothing anyone could do, the second one was repaired, restored, made whole again. He had the damage fixed, the interior redone, and later even had the roof repainted from black to white, giving it the pink and white look the world would come to know. And then he did the most important thing of all, the thing that made this car immortal. He never let it go. Elvis owned that pink Cadillac for the rest of his life. Through the fame, the films, the fortune, the fleet of far more expensive cars that followed, the Rolls-Royces, the Stutz Blackhawk, the gold-trimmed limousines, he held on to the pink Fleetwood he'd given his mother. It was never sold, never traded. When he died, it stayed exactly where it belonged, and today it sits, lovingly preserved, at his home in Graceland, where millions of people have filed past it, the single most famous car in the history of rock and roll. Which brings us, finally, back to the myth we started with. Because you may have seen the stories, the videos, the headlines, claiming that Elvis's lost pink Cadillac is out there somewhere, rotting in a junkyard, waiting to be discovered by some lucky soul with a metal detector and a dream. Here is the truth, and it matters. There is no lost pink Cadillac in a junkyard. There were only ever 2 pink Cadillacs in Elvis Presley's life, and we know exactly where both of them are. One is ash, burned on an Arkansas roadside in the summer of 1955, mourned by a heartbroken boy who'd stayed up all night loving it. The other is a treasure behind glass at Graceland, still wearing that custom shade named after the man himself. Every other Elvis pink Cadillac you'll ever see, and there are many, is a replica, a tribute, a fake wearing a borrowed legend. Fans and dealers have painted countless old Cadillacs pink and whispered his name over them, but only 2 ever truly belonged to him, and that's the part the junkyard stories always miss. The real tale was never about a car waiting to be found. It was about a car that was lost, and a heartbroken kid who refused to let the loss be the end, who turned the worst day of his young life into a rose-pink symbol of a promise kept to his mother. One Cadillac died so the other could become a legend. And you can still go and stand in front of that legend today. One car burned to ash on a lonely road. The other still waits behind glass, admired by millions. Yet the machine Elvis loved most was the one he lost in a single day. So tell me below, which forgotten car should we bring back to life next? If you enjoy forgotten British car stories like this, consider subscribing. There are many more coming every week.